from Radio Row in New Orleans, Louisiana. Super Bowl week, baby. Eagles and Chiefs rematch. Some of the biggest names in sports and entertainment will be right here. Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. It's the Jake Asman Show.
Live from New Orleans, and oh baby, do we have a fun one here at Radio Row. One of the great Radio Row guests I think you could get on any talk show. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Stugotz, Jon Wiener.
I appreciate that, man. That open was fantastic. That's like a radio open right there. Whose voice was that? That's the voice of God, whoever that was.
We're ready to go. I mean,
okay.
we had to we had to bring in God to get ready for Radio Row in New Orleans.
I appreciate that, but I appreciate the little things about radio. I love a good open. I love a good bumper. I know the whole thing has changed. Like, this is no longer Radio Row. That makes me sad. It's like Digital Row. Radio is dying a slow death. But I miss saying the joke and then hearing a bumper because we're going to break. Like, I miss that stuff. I do. I love radio, man.
You know, your career to me has always fascinated me. One, we're both fellow Long Island guys.
Yes, we are.
I've always looked at your career, and I know you have the New York sports ties, but the way that you've been able to have a career while basically making fun of the career you have, I've always had a real appreciation for.
So I think you and I, we're probably both fans. I'm assuming you're a fan of Christopher Mad Dog Russo.
Absolutely.
Who is the mayor of Radio Row. I'm the mayor in waiting, by the way. And so, you know, it's interesting. I told Chris this a while back. The second I stopped trying to be Christopher Mad Dog Russo, because there is no replicating Chris Russo, okay? The second I stopped trying to be him and started to make fun of him is the second my career took off. And so no one is more shocked by my success than I am, okay? Nobody. So, but I love it. I love what we do. It's we work in the playpen. This is great. I love Radio Row. It's my home away from home, and quite frankly, I wish it was my home.
Radio Row,
yeah,
or a Dead concert?
It's
what are you choosing?
Such a good question, man. It's because I love this. You know how much I love this. You have seen me on the stage right across from you. I think I did 22 interviews today, and I would do 22 more if the right people came through. But it's a dead show.
I just like when you go up to random people with your phone. You're like, look, he's here. He's doing there. He's over there. Stephen A. is right there.
I forget who we had on, but we were all just, it was Ed Reed and then Joe Burrow walking by. And, like, I'm distracted. I'm not listening to Ed Reed. Ed Reed's not listening to me because we're all looking at Joe Burrow. And that's what Radio Row is all about. Like, when do you get a chance to see Joe Burrow? And then Joe Burrow yells out, yo, Stugotz. And so I take that as like, oh, he knows me, right? That's cool. And so he was on the show because we captured all the audio from that and the video from that. And so that will be in the montage of guests we had on this week, even though we didn't really have him on.
Friend of the show, Joe Burrow.
New friend of the show, yes.
Love that. All right.
Best friend of the show, yes.
So you grew up in Port Washington on Long Island.
Yes.
And
to answer your question, by the way, dead show, in case I didn't answer.
Dead show,
okay.
got it.
Yeah.
When you were growing up, when did something in radio want to be something you wanted to pursue? Take us back to how you even got into sports talk radio in the first place.
So I grew up on Long Island in Port Washington, as you pointed out, and I was like, WFAN came into existence, and it was the first, I think, 24-hour sports radio station. Perfect market to do it. And then, you know, like a lot of guys who grew up where we grew up, I just started putting on Mike and the Mad Dog, and I'm like, holy shit. Can I curse here?
Oh, let it rip.
Okay. Holy shit. These guys sound like me and my friends talking about sports. They're not former athletes. There's no way they're former athletes. Russo is changing his mind mid-sentence. I'm like, this is, you know, he loves the coach, and then the next week he wants to fire the coach. And that's how sports fans are. I mean, and it's okay. And so I fell in love with their dynamic and that radio station because I don't know how much you got to listen to them.
I got the last 5 years of Mike and the Mad Dog.
Okay.
That's when I first started really getting into sports talk radio.
And I got to be honest, they were just as good in their last 5 years as they were the entire time.
Right.
So you didn't miss anything, meaning you didn't miss their prime. You know what I'm saying? And so I was so enamored by their show and the fact that these guys were being paid a lot of money to talk about New York sports. And their voices just reflected perfectly off of each other. It was the perfect show. It's the perfect sports radio show as far as I'm concerned. And so I fell in love with it. And I really never had any sort of desires to kind of do radio because as I was growing up, sports radio didn't really exist.
Right. They were the first.
And so I remember driving home one day. My dad picked me up from lacrosse practice. We were listening to Mike and Chris. And as me and my dad tend to do, and I think a lot of people will relate to this, we didn't want to pull into the driveway because they were in mid-segment. So we drove around the neighborhood, me and my dad, and I'm like, Dad, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. Are these guys getting paid to do this? And he said, yes, they're getting paid a lot probably to do this. And I said, this is what I want to do for a living. And so it was right there. Like I remember I was 16 years old in my car telling my dad, I'm going to do this for a living. And my dad said, you've never mentioned this to me before. And I said, well, I'm just 16, Dad. But now I know. I figured out what I want to do for a living. And it's all because of Mike and Chris. And so from there, I just kind of pursued it relentlessly because you have to pursue this relentlessly. And if you don't, you're not going to make it. And so you really have to make it your life, right? And so I kind of decided just based off of Mike and Chris that this is what I wanted to do with no idea if I was going to be able to pull it off. I knew I had a good voice. I was going up to some studios and making tapes, and it all worked out. But I give all the credit for me wanting to do this, not because I wanted to do it, because I heard them and I was influenced by them. And like many kids who grew up on Long Island or in New York, I wanted to do exactly what Mike and Chris were doing. And eventually I got to it. And so that's how we got into it.
Now, you're down in South Florida. You obviously, you connect with Dan Le Batard, but could you ever imagine doing a show with Dan as long as you have? Because you guys are so wildly different. And that's the charm of the show in a way because of the fact Dan is, an old school, big J journalist.
Yes.
And you're the funny sports fan who doesn't take anything seriously.
I don't take anything seriously. Like, I really don't. We shouldn't be taking this stuff seriously. Like, for me, the highlight of this week was having the Old Spice guy on. I mean, seriously. That guy, he's got such a great voice. And having the Old Spice guy talk to the Old Spice guy in a box and ask him questions is like, to me, that's what this is. That's what this is all about. Dan and I are complete opposites. There are many times I think we would both tell you in the first year, 18 months, 24 months, maybe. I think, neither of us thought this was going to be sustainable or going to work or going to last as long as it's lasted, which is now.
Like the show would, or you guys would have to adjust what you do in the show?
Well, we did. So we started off doing the show. I was driving the show. And I didn't know Dan very well. Dan and I were connected by a mutual friend, Boog Shambi, who's now the voice of the Cubs, but at the time was doing a midday show in Miami and was really close with Dan, really close with me. And he said, you guys would be great together because Stu will cover all the stuff that you don't want to cover, Dan. Like, he wants to do sports radio and you don't. And that's an interesting tug, right? And so we kind of equated to, your dad's home. He decides to work from home for a day, and he's taking his work seriously, but the kids aren't letting him get the work done because they want to hang out with Dad. We are constantly just not letting Dan get to where Dan wants to get to. We're not letting him get his work done. And so we figured it out. Like, I remember Dan would drive around on his bicycle in the middle of, it's weird, right? In the middle of the night, because whatever it is that we were doing didn't feel right to him. And we sat down and we couldn't figure it out. So Boog sat us down and he said, it's the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz, and the first voice I'm hearing is Stugotz's. Dan needs to drive the show. Because what I was doing at the time was I was guessing what it is Dan wanted to talk about. And what I wanted to talk about and what Dan wanted to talk about were two very different things. So if you go listen to the first year of our show, you will hear me lob questions like to Dan, like, hey, so-and-so on the hot seat. And anyone who knows Le Batard knows he doesn't want to do hot seat. It's the last thing in the world he wants to do. So I was tired of guessing what it is he wanted to do. And so Boog said, hey, let Dan just drive the show. You react to whatever it is Dan is saying. Just be yourself, have fun. And so that little change right there, I think, is the reason that we've lasted as long as we've lasted. That and the fact that we just don't take ourselves too seriously. Like, we all understand what our job is when we walk into that studio every single day. And I think that makes navigating through this industry a lot easier, at least it has for us, because there's not a ton of ego involved in our show. To your point earlier, I'm sitting there making fun of myself, and I'm allowing them to make fun of me. Because I don't give a shit. We're talking about sports for a living, and we're trying to entertain people. And if they're entertained by me being made fun of, so be it. At least they're being entertained,
Now, for you, I was listening over the summer, and you've done this, maybe, I don't even know, I guess it was the summer, whenever you were filling in for Boomer on the Fan.
Oh, I love that.
Now, you grew up on WFAN, and my understanding is you were very close to actually being the program director
I almost took
at WFAN.
I did. I was very close.
But were you comfortable giving up being on the air to do a job that you're not on the air for?
So I had no choice. It's interesting. A lot of people have asked me about that. I had no choice. Chris Olivero, who runs WFAN and is a legend in our industry, great dude. I kept, like, there was a constant tug of me asking, can I do on-air stuff while I'm the program director? And he said, at least early on, why did you sell everyone on the idea that you actually want to be the program director of WFAN. And he was right. And so I knew for a short time I was going to have to pull myself off the air if I did it. Eventually, I think I would have gotten back on. A lot of people wanted to see what that would have felt like what that would have been like. Gio was begging me to do it. Evan Roberts thought it was a great idea. All the guys there thought it was a great idea until they realized what I wanted to do was take their jobs. Okay, and then suddenly it was not such a good idea. I'm teasing. I've gotten in trouble for doing that, but I love radio. I love that radio station, and I've been doing it for 20 years on air. So I was thinking,
and
man,
you wanted to move back to New York
to be the guy. WFAN at the time, they've had 3 program directors in that station's history.
It's like the Steelers with coaches.
That job and that station, exactly right. Yes, it comes with some gravitas. And so there is no station in which I would take myself off the air and go be a program director for other than WFAN. I was super attracted by the job. I also realized during that process that program directors aren't getting paid what they used to. Okay, and so I couldn't make the. At the end of the day, we couldn't make the money work. But I am sitting here telling you, and I've said it before, I wanted that job. I wanted to do that job because I wanted to take 20 years of what I've learned in this industry, sales, promotion, not taking yourself so seriously. You don't have to talk about the fucking, the Mets and the Yankees in July. Like, have some fun for crying out loud.
You don't even
I just knocked over my bottle of water. It's like that station has not evolved at all. Okay? And they're still pulling in 15 shares. Right. And so I just wanted to put my spin and my touch on the station that I grew up listening to because I thought it would have been fun.
Well, every show would have been a top 5 list. I feel like we would have had top 5 lists on all 3 of the day parts.
So one of the demands I made was I said, listen, I know your staff. I know all of them. I know Evan. Okay. I know Sal. I know Gio. Maybe not Sal. I know Gio. Because Sal, listen, it's okay. I don't say this as criticism of Sal. I don't think Sal needs anybody, to be quite honest with you. So, but I know Gio, I know Boomer, I know those guys. And so I wanted a microphone in my office. And I wanted to have like remote access right into their studios because I told Olivero, they're going to ask me to come on all the time. Right. And so I don't want to get up all the time and have to walk into the studio. So put a fucking microphone right here, and we got ourselves a deal. And he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't budge.
I'll say this: the guy they ended up hiring, Ryan Hurley, he gave me my first opportunity at ESPN New York. So I'll forever be grateful to him. And he's awesome. So it worked out. You're meant to be on air, not behind the scenes.
Maybe I don't know. I love that radio station. So if there was a way I could impact that radio station,
would you hire me if you eventually run that radio
station? I would. It was going to be my first time.
All right, I appreciate that.
It was. I mean, you have listen, there were big things on your horizon if I had got that job. But unfortunately, I didn't. So you're stuck here talking to me.
Stu got saying that after I met him for the first time 2 days ago. Yeah, I've been listening to you a long time. And my friends from college are the biggest Le Batard and Stugotz fans.
It's
so
crazy.
They were like, you got to talk to Stugotz this week. And I go, I will. I know he's a big Jet fan. But for you, like, have you lost any of your love of the teams you grew up rooting for? Like, has like the years down in South Florida and just your career?
Oh, no, not South Florida.
Has it taken you away from being like the diehard sports fan that you were when you grew up on Long Island?
So it's a great question. Let me ask you this. It has nothing to do with South Florida. It has everything to do with this industry. Are you as big a sports fan since you've gotten into this industry as you were beforehand? Because it changes. It skews things, right? Because you're watching games and you're thinking about takes,
100%. Right. Well, I still am with my teams, but when I'm watching, I would say the games don't have the biggest stakes. I'm no longer as like diehard all in invested as maybe I once was because you just kind of get used to being in that environment day in, day out.
It becomes a part of you, right? In a way that it's not when you're just a fan. And I'm not saying it's bad being just a fan. I miss the days where I was just a fan, where I'm not sitting there thinking, what can I say that no one else is going to say tomorrow morning? That's a weird way to watch the games. And so if anything, I would say my sports interest in general has waned a little bit just because it's all consuming. It's my entire life. And I still love it. I still love the Jets. I still love the Mets. I love the Knicks. I'm an Islander fan. The only team that's done any sort of winning for me my entire life. And so, listen, maybe it's a product of me just being a fan of bad teams. I mean, part of it. But it's the industry as well. The industry, if you're in it long enough, it will suck some of the sports fandom out of you. It's hard to really articulate and explain why. But I'm watching a Jet game, but I'm almost rooting for them to lose because I know it's better for our show. It's crazy.
I mean, look, and being a Jet fan the last 14 years, I mean, it's been a nightmare. I talk about it every day on this channel.
Yes.
It's just there's no worse experience than being a Jet fan. You don't even have your own stadium, no playoffs in 14 years. They haven't won more than 7 games in a decade. It's a nightmare. Yet 41,000 people subscribe to this channel to hear about the Jets, and like that to me is insane when you consider how bad the team's been, but still how passionate the fan base is.
Imagine how many people would subscribe and listen to this thing if they were actually good.
It's true. I think about it often.
But what's better, though? Is it better that they're bad or better that they're good? For you personally, right? That's what I'm talking about 100%. With the industry, yes.
Interesting would be better, but if they were winning,
interesting would be, but they've been interesting the last 2 years and lost, that's like that Valhalla, dude. That's it, man.
100%. And that's how I'm able to do this. Yes. But it's like I can't even imagine. Like, could you imagine if the Jets were ever on a radio row for the week of a Super Bowl, what the fan base would be like this whole week?
Oh my God.
Can you imagine that?
If you think they hate us now. Right? The absolute worst. Listen, I love that organization so much. And no organization that I root for has hurted me more than that organization. And yet somehow I come back for more. It's just like I'm convinced had the Jets traded somehow gotten Josh Allen would have been bad. If they got Patrick Mahomes would be out of the league. Yep. If they got Joe Burrow, there's no way Joe Burrow would be the Joe Burrow that he is today. Aaron Rodgers went there. He's he's probably the greatest passer of the football that I've ever seen. He gets to the Jets, he tears his Achilles.
4 plays in.
Like bad things happen to us. And so, but I love that team. I do. I love that team. I hope one day I'll see him in a Super Bowl in my lifetime. I'm not certain we will, but here's what I love. I love Aaron Glenn. For no other reason, Aaron Glenn wants this job, and he wants it to be his last job. And I can't remember the last time we've had a coach who wanted this. Who dreams of being the Jets coach? Aaron Glenn does, and he wants it to be his last job that he ever takes in the NFL, and that's a good starting point for us, right?
That is very true. All right, Final question.
Yep.
When you think back to your career in sports media, Stugotz,
yes,
what is the number one memory that immediately stands out?
Oh, man.
You've done everything.
Yeah. Oh, God. Jesus Christ. That's a good question. The first.
Thank you.
The first memory that sticks out, I'm trying to think of some Russo stuff. I would say it's the first. Yeah, I would say it's the first time I filled in at WFAN. So I came in. It was after Tiger won the PGA Championship. It was on a Sunday night. This station, I'm telling you, it's amazing. They've never heard of me. They don't know who I am. During the Open, okay, it was a generic Open for like a generic host. And it was like a one-time shot I got when Chernoff was still the program director at WFAN. And I crushed it, by the way. It was a great show. But every phone line was lit up, and they don't know who they're speaking to. And quite frankly, they don't care who they're speaking to. But I realized for me as a radio dork, that sitting in that seat, I was sitting in Francesca's seat, right? I'm sitting in Mike and Chris's studio, and I'm doing a show on Sunday night, and Bob Usler is doing sports update. And I'm like, what the hell is happening here? And so I remember the first time, and then Chernoff wrote like a glowing review of the show. And so if you're going to ask me the number one highlight, I would say it's the first time. Just the magnitude of sitting in that studio and in that chair in particular, Francesca's chair. That's probably the greatest highlight that I have from 25 years of doing this.
I lied. I just thought of another question based on what we talked about the other day. You were going on a bunch of stations. People were coming up to you. They were asking for the Stugotz Super Bowl prediction. Now, half the shows you said one team. The other half you said the other.
Yeah, it's so a tradition unlike any other. We do it every year at Radio Row.
There's a 50% split. So yes. I gotta get you on the record, at least on this show, who you have on Sunday.
I'm trying to think who I took on the last show. So let me think about it for a second. I've done 30 interviews. I do this every year. So my philosophy on this is if I do 30 interviews, and I say 15 times it's the Eagles, 15 times it's going to be the Kansas City Chiefs, 50% of the country is going to think I'm a genius, right? And so, and I'll take 50% of the country. I'm good with that. Listen, I don't want to bet against the Eagles. I mean, against the Chiefs. You have the best team versus the best player, right? I do find it interesting that if Nick Sirianni wins this game, he'll likely go down as the greatest Eagles coach in Eagles history, considering he's coaching against Andy Reid. I love that. It's incredible, right? And by the way, Philadelphia, if you're listening, You don't deserve Nick Sirianni.
No.
You all wanted to fire him fucking 5 games ago. Get the hell out of here, all of
should
you.
have Jeff Ulbrich or Robert Saleh.
It's unbelievable. And now they're cheering him like he's the greatest coach they've ever had. Nick Sirianni and Philadelphia deserve each other. They should be embracing this guy. They should be trying to fire him. What would you give to have Nick Sirianni as the head coach?
I would trade my draft. I can't take it
trade
anymore.
my draft. Because you know we're not going to draft correctly.
No,
Yes.
Pick 7. Who's it going to be? Probably someone that's out of the league in 4 years.
And then we get Sirianni, and all of a sudden, like, he gets a heart attack. I'm sorry. But that's the kind of shit that happens to our organization. I forgot what the question was. Who am I taking the game?
Yeah, who you got?
Sometimes, listen, I learned this from Russo. You just keep talking, and eventually the question will pop back into your head. Just rip someone, keep talking, do something. All right, who am I taking? I don't want to go against the Chiefs, man. Yeah, best team versus best quarterback, best player. I've gone against the Chiefs so many times. I'm going to take the Chiefs. I'm going to take the Chiefs.
KC,
on the record, I'm taking. I'm not going to be fooled and bet against Patrick Mahomes. I'm only going to do that on half the stations I go on this week.
Ladies and gentlemen, Stugotz, Jon Wiener, the pride of Port Washington, Long Island, for the Dan Le Batard Show, of course, with us here. This is awesome, man. I've been a fan of yours for a while. Great to meet you the other day, and I appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, man. I don't know if I'm the pride of Port. I'm not the pride of anything.
the mayor of Radio Row once Chris Russo retires.
I am the mayor in waiting, yes. But he's never going to leave, I'm telling you.
They'll bury him here.
Russo loves this place more than any. Like, you see him walking around here, right?
We had him on the other day.
He did your show?
Yeah, he did.
How good was it?
He's the best. He's from Syosset. I love the guy.
So the key, like with Russo, and I'm sorry we're going long here, but with Russo, the key is you don't have to do much. Like, I love people who don't make you work very hard when you're interviewing them. I don't want to have to pull teeth, man. Like, we had Ed Reed on. I asked him one question. He took over the interview because he's the most confident guy in this place. And, like, don't make me work too hard. I didn't make you work too hard, did I?
No, this was fantastic.
And Russo never makes anyone work too hard.
The best.
He is the greatest guest in the history of sports radio.
Stugotz, my name is Jake Asman. We're live from Radio Row all week. We got more coverage coming up on the channel. Like the video, subscribe, and of course, check out Stugotz on the Dan Le Batard Show. Back with more from Radio Row right here in New Orleans.